From our 22 News Broadcast Center, this is 22 News in Focus. Today, a look at how longer school days would affect students in Western Massachusetts. Here's Laura Hutchinson.
Good Sunday afternoon and welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Laura Hutchinson. Federal and state officials announced Monday that Massachusetts and 4 other states will begin implementing longer school days for some students next September to provide extra academic traction and enrichment for thousands of children. Schools in the pilot program will add 300 extra hours of learning each year for the next 3 years. Here in Massachusetts, schools in Lawrence and Fall River will see longer days under the pilot program. And depending on how it goes, it's something that could impact more students in the future. So that's where 22 News in Focus comes in. Today we'll talk to educators about the pros and cons of a longer school day to help you form your own opinion on the issue. We'll also talk to the superintendent of schools in Springfield about that district's experiences with an extended learning day. But first, we begin today with State Senator Jim Welch, who's here to talk to us about the program. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
So the pilot program is dubbed the Time for Innovation Matters in Education Collaborative Massachusetts, and it's receiving federal and state money. Talk to me about how this works. How did this come to be, first of all?
Well, it's a federal grant, a federal initiative. Massachusetts is one of 5 states, as you had mentioned before, that are going to participate in the program. It's a pilot program, and there's 2 communities or 2 districts, school districts across Massachusetts, one being Fall River, the other being Lawrence, both urban area school districts that are going to participate in this pilot program. And of course, the idea is to try and get these programs, the extended or expanded learning programs, into some school districts to see and to try and work towards improving results in those school districts and seeing if it's going to have a positive effect.
Now, some school districts in Massachusetts have already sort of experimented with the extended learning day, Springfield being one of them. We'll hear about that later on in the program, Chicopee as well. How is this different from that?
Well, it's a federal program, and I think it's designed really to, as a pilot program, to see if there's a, to target towards urban area schools, obviously, and at the same time to really see if there's a potential for it to grab a foothold, to see if there should be a statewide policy potentially around it. When you start with 2 school districts, obviously there's many school districts across the state, and every school district's a little bit different. So when you talk about rolling out something that's quite a big change for school districts and for students, for teachers, administrators alike. It's really something that needs to be tested. So I think a pilot program is the safest way, I think, to go about it at first, and that's why I think you're seeing the federal government focus on 5 states, and we in Massachusetts focusing on 2 school districts.
Have you heard any response from Fall River and Lawrence? Did they know about this ahead of time, or was this news to them this week as well?
Well, both school districts, I think, are relatively unique. I know that the Lawrence School District especially is struggling with their results, have several level 4 schools in their district, and in terms of hearing from Lawrence school administrators, teachers, students, parents, of course I represent Springfield, West Springfield, and Chicopee, so I hear for those parents more specifically, but the parents in general, I think, obviously want to see results, positive results for their students, for their children in terms of students. But not all parents agree that this is the best way to go about it, of course.
What do you think you will have to see as results for this to end up being something that's implemented statewide? What are some of those little factors that you're going to be gauging and measuring throughout the next 3 years to see if this is something that's worth trying in all districts?
Sure. Well, of course, I look at it from the position of being a legislator, but at the same time the position of being a parent as well. And of course, I want my children to have access to the greatest educational opportunities that they can possibly have, and potentially exceed or meet those high thresholds. But at the same time, I want my children to enjoy school. I want them to be in a school environment that they're going to be able to not only exceed, but and thrive, but at the same time feel comfortable, feel nourished, feel safe, feel as though school is something that they want to go to every day. So I think those are questions that we're going to have to answer throughout this pilot program.
We've always heard that, you know, Governor Patrick frequently will tout how well schools in Massachusetts are doing. In fact, he got up on the national stage at the Democratic National Convention, and he mentioned in his speech how the schools are doing in Massachusetts now. If our schools are doing so well, I guess, why would we be included in this? Is there any particular reason that Massachusetts stood out, or, you know, what do you think the plan is for this?
Well, I think, you know, first and foremost, I think, you know, we as a state want to, you know, we're always looking for ways to improve, whether it's the educational system or any other part of state agency or state system. So Massachusetts, doesn't surprise me that Massachusetts would be on the forefront and be part of a pilot program, because we typically are willing to kind of think outside the box, so to speak. But when we talk about the educational system, that's a system that we're used to kind of functioning a very similar way for over the past, you know, several hundred years, or a couple hundred years. So, you know, to make a change can't be done all at once. It can't be just a blanket change where we're going to all of a sudden, you know, extend the learning day for all students in all school districts across the state. I think we have to look and see and evaluate you know, what the impact's going to be on all our kids. And maybe all school districts, it's not the right idea for all school districts. Maybe our more urban areas, maybe that would, maybe this will have a larger impact and be able to provide even some things that are, you know, especially, I guess, lacking maybe outside of the classroom for some school districts and for some school children. So I think it's the pilot program really is the way to go, because it's not a sweeping you know, change all at once.
I understand the federal government is paying for most of this. This is coming from federal funds. But how are we going to afford extending the school day? This isn't just keeping the lights on and school buses, but also having the programs. You know, I've heard teachers say that they hope this is an opportunity to extend the arts and give people, give students another chance to have exposure to music and arts and things like that. At a time where it feels like budgets are only getting smaller and state funding in the, you know, in general is, you know, less and less, you know, how can you guarantee that this would be something that you could fund? Do you see this being something in the future at a time when I feel like we're always cutting?
Well, I think it's a ways away. I think it's going to be a multi-step process. Certainly, you know, we're coming off of a week where the governor had to announce, you know, 9 C cuts, and it reminds us every day of the struggles and the, you know, the challenges in terms of budgets. Do we want to improve our educational system? Do we want to improve our results? And do we want to make sure that our children have the best possible educational resources available to them? Absolutely. But at the same time, I think a lot needs to be done, a lot needs to be thought about, and a lot needs to be tested in those school districts to find out if it's something that we're going to try and implement statewide. Now, we do have funding available if a school district does want to decide they want to enter in expanded learning. And then, of course, it is a component in terms of those schools that are in level 4 status right now, that they can, or they also participate in expanded learning. So it can have a positive effect, but I think that we have to take in consideration not only what the results are, but what the overall effect is on the students, on the parents, the community, and the schools, and the teachers. Obviously, if we're going to find a way to pay for it, if we're going to require teachers to work extended hours, how are you going to pay those teachers? How are you going to pay administrators? How are you going to not only just keep the lights on, but have all the necessary resources available so you can actually function in expanded learning time? And those are questions I think that all need to be answered and worked out. So I think it's going to be a very a process that needs to be taken one step at a time, and every step has to be thoroughly vetted out. We're
going to hear a lot more about how this worked out in Springfield as well, but from what you know about how this has worked in other communities, from what you know and as a lawmaker and as a parent, have you formed an opinion on this issue?
Well, my opinion kind of stems around the fact that I want to see results, you know, an improvement, constantly moving in the right direction. But at the same time, I think that school learning needs to be thought more from a community-based approach. And I think expanded learning potentially could play a role in improving our results in all school districts, but I don't think it's going to be the only solution or the only part of the piece of the puzzle to make those improvements. I think, like I said, I'm not sure it's the right answer for every school district.
Yeah.
I really don't. It may be the right answer for some school districts, and maybe it's the right decision to leave that up to those school districts to decide, because they're the best ones to know what they think is the right thing for their school district. So I think right now we need to take a very measured, a slow approach to this decision and to implement it very slowly.
And speaking of local control as well, I understand that the local districts get to decide, you know, when there are budget cuts, if they will do away with the music or, you know, the gym class and all that. Do you think that it would be a local decision to, you know, extend the day later, start later? You know, how much local control do you think that we will see in this process?
Well, I think that's a very good question, because you know, many people approach education different. Some people think that it should be a more well-rounded approach. Some people think you should focus on more math, science, and you know, and reading, the you know, components of education. That should be the main focus, and not as much concern with the other activities that you can participate in a school. So I really do think that local control is important, because, you know, that's why we have elected officials. That's why we have people who run for school committee, and we, you know, have people that make those decisions based on what they feel is the right thing for those community. And that way the parents can have a say, the teachers that work in those communities can have a say, and of course, obviously the school children, you know, they don't necessarily get to vote, but they can certainly have a say, and they will certainly vote with how they respond to the different approaches that are taken in the school, whether the results are, you know, you see an increase in results, or increase in you know, statistics in terms of positive measurement. But at the same time, you know, we want to make sure that school is a positive experience all around for all students.
Sure. Well, Senator Jim Welch, I want to thank you so much for being here. It sounds like we really are going to be taking a slow approach and gathering a lot of opinions and really looking into these communities that are taking part in this to see how this will affect all of Massachusetts. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And next, we'll talk about the extended school day from an educator standpoint. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Today's program is about expanded learning time, or longer school days in public schools. Federal and state officials announced Monday that Massachusetts and 4 other states are going to start implementing longer school days for some students in September. Extending the school day is, of course, a controversial topic, so that's what we're talking about here today. We just spoke with a state senator about the prospects of this becoming law here in Massachusetts someday. Later in the program, we're going to hear from the superintendent of schools in Springfield so that we can hear what it's like to have a school day, an extended school day there. But joining us right now, we have AIC graduate psychology professor Tony Spinelli-Nannon. I want to thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And you've taught a whole number of grades. You were just
absolutely. Yeah, I've taught kindergarten through 6th grade, and then I went on to college and taught undergraduates, and now I'm teaching graduate students.
Okay, very good. And you're at AIC. That's very good.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here today. Really do appreciate it. So as somebody who has been in the classroom, you know, from young students all the way up, what are your thoughts, just on the surface, of having an extended learning day? What are your thoughts on the topic?
Okay, on the surface, actually, and in sort of a blanket statement, I would say that a longer school day is a good idea. However, there are a lot of caveats that go with that. First of all, programs need to be planned. They really have to look at the research that is behind this movement towards a longer school day. We have to be concerned not only with better test scores, but we have to be most concerned with better learning. And if we do that, then our students will have better test scores. We can't just add another 2 hours to the day and do the same old, same old. It's going to take planning, it's going to take time, it's going to take involvement of the community and the parents.
What do you think an ideal change would be in the school day? Do you think that they need longer time with the core subjects? Do you think that they need to add in things like arts and physical activity and recess and socializing? You know, what do some of those changes think that
Well, absolutely. Students during a school day need to move at a much slower pace. They need time to think about what they're learning, to try to integrate it into what they already know. We move them at such a quick pace that they almost don't have time to think about what they're doing. In addition, they do need the arts. They need music. They need physical activity. We can't cut back on any of those because those aid learning in a variety of ways. Developmentally speaking, young children would work much better if they could move at a slower pace and have a little bit more time to accomplish things. For our older students, adolescents, it would be so much better if they just started later. I know this isn't what people want to hear exactly, but they certainly should start later. Biologically and developmentally, they are not ready to learn at 7:30 in the morning. If we started them at 9, ended somewhere around 4:30, the learning would be much more effective. My daughter will just not like this that I'm telling you this, but when she was in, I think it was 10th grade, they started school at 7:30 in the morning, and she was in Spanish class, and she loved Spanish class. She really wanted to learn. She found herself one day out in the hall when the bell rang. The teacher literally picked her up in her chair and her desk and put her out in the hallway, and she never woke up. And I tried what I could to get them to sleep, but they wouldn't do it. They can't sleep at 10 or 11 at night. We want them to just fall asleep on cue, and they can't do that.
So it's not because they're not sleeping long enough, or maybe it is because they're not sleeping long enough at night. Just, you think in general, students of that age are just not ready to wake up, regardless
right,
of when
absolutely.
they go to sleep.
Well, they're certainly not getting enough sleep. Sure. They need a lot more sleep than they're getting. But they need to wake up very early in the morning, so they're up when where their brain is really off. And then they have an alert period of time during the middle of the day, and then they have a couple of lesser times when they're less alert, and then somewhere around 7 o'clock they are wide awake at night, ready to go. And there's nothing that's going to get them to sleep when they are alert and ready to go.
Sure. Do you think, as far as the core classes are concerned, that there is enough learning time? Is there enough time to at least cover the curriculum right now? Or do you feel like teachers are struggling to push it all in at the end of the school year? Are they skipping over things, you know, or are we really covering the curriculum? We're just jamming it in, or how does it work right now?
I think in many ways we're just jamming it in. We certainly have to cover a certain amount of information. As a college professor myself, I struggle with that. In how much depth am I going to go? And am I going to sacrifice adding more information? Or am I going to move towards more information but not as much in depth? I think that what we need to do is, again, to be able to move at a slower pace, to go into great depth in our subjects. And if we promote the true in-depth understanding of a subject, we won't need to teach a lot more facts. So we can spend more time on very specific areas of the curriculum that seem to be very valuable. The other thing we can do with a longer school day is to provide hands-on tasks, hands-on experiences. We can have community leaders come in and take part of the burden of enrichment. I know I went to a second grade classroom to explain what a school psychologist does, and I really thought, oh my goodness, how could I possibly explain to a group of second graders what a school psychologist does? You know, most of them never heard of it. Sure. They don't even hear of it in college. Sure. And I did it. They were lovely and they were interested. So we can call on our parents, call on our community leaders, call on business leaders to come into our schools to be able to provide some of the enrichment and some more information.
Just to switch things up a little.
Yeah, just to see. Yeah, we have to do that. We just can't add more time and say, okay, you're going to sit in math class for another 15 minutes.
Right.
And
right.
English, that won't work.
They're like, I was done 15 minutes ago.
Exactly.
What would you say to your critics, or not to your critics, but the critics of the idea that would say that kids are already doing extracurricular activities. They already go home and have several hours of homework to do that takes them to 8 o'clock at night, which is part of the reason maybe why they're not going to bed so early, because then they need that wind down time, that family time as well. But what would you say to people who are saying that they already have such a full day, extending the school day would just eat into that even more, you know, because they are going to continue to play basketball and they're going to continue to have homework. And so what would you say to that point?
Well, I see children, or students I should say, practicing in the middle school and in the high school. They're practicing their sports sometimes till 4:30, 5:30 in the evening. So they're not getting home early because of the sports. I think some of that can be incorporated into that extra time. And if they go slower, and I'm sort of beating the same old drum, if they go a little slower during their school day, then they won't be as tired. Then they might not need as much homework. They'll have all those enrichment activities. Homework is really just to practice, and if they've done that, they should have less homework. So for the most part, I don't think that should affect their level of fatigue, or I think that they're more interested in school. If they can spend a little bit more time also, as long as we're talking about extending the day, they should spend a little bit more time at lunch. They should spend a little bit more time socializing between classes. I know I've taught groups of adults who are talking by the end of our session, and I'm thinking, oh dear, you know, and you want your children to just sit there and not say anything for hours and hours. Of course they want to socialize a bit. We need to give them time to do that.
I think you just won over a few fans of this extended learning day by saying less homework. I'm sure there's people at home. All right, now I'm listening.
Now
Let's go back to this. Yeah, exactly. Very quickly, do you see this happening in our state, or, you know, becoming the new norm? You know, as somebody who's been in the education field for some time, do you see this being something that we will adapt to in the future, or do you think this is so far down the road that it may not even impact our students today?
Well, I think that the students maybe in elementary school in the early grades, this may impact them. I think that it's going to take a while. It's a process, it's slow, it's step by step, and it should be. We need to do the research to find out what is effective in increasing that school day, how we're going to do it. Are we going to have 2 shifts of teachers? How are we going to compensate teachers? How are we going to make sure that children can do the sports? How are we going to incorporate enrichment activities? It seems like they're easy questions, but they're not when you're talking about thousands of children. So this will be a slow process. I think that in the past, in education, we have said, well, this is a great idea, let's do it. And we do it without enough planning. And all of a sudden it doesn't work, and we dump that idea and go on to the next. We can't be doing that.
It's a good thing
anymore.
we're taking our time, and I think we heard that from Senator Welch as well, that it's something even lawmakers are thinking this really needs to be a slow approach to. Dr. Tony Spinelli-Nannon, I want to thank you so much for being here. Great information. And we're going to have another perspective from a retired school teacher. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Today we've been discussing a new initiative that extends the school year by up to 300 hours. 2 Massachusetts communities will take part in the pilot program, but it's not the first time Massachusetts schools have tried this. In just a little bit, we will speak with the Springfield school superintendent about the district's experience with a longer school day. But first, let's get another perspective from a longtime educator. Joining us, we have Jean Trink, a retired school teacher and counselor from Agawam. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yes, thank you for being here. We just had a state senator on, just sort of talking about, you know, his viewpoint on this, and, you know, why the legislature is taking part in these active roles in the schools, and also from an educator who appeared to be very much in favor of it. Of course, there are a few, you know, facets of that that you want to make sure were, and yours is sort of different. So you would say that you're opposed to this.
On the surface, yes. Okay. Simply because, first of all, there's not a lot of evidence-based research out there, first of all, that supports the correlation between extending the school day and academic achievement. One of the good things that might come out of such a pilot program is that it begins the trail of some data, accruing some data that might lead to some conclusions down the road. I also think that in terms of my reservations,
you said that there are some variables to this, that this may not be for all districts.
Correct.
Talk to me about that.
I'm thinking about the impact on parents, on the kids certainly, on parents, on administrators, and on teachers. This move toward extending the academic day is not just about closing the achievement gap, let's say, between African Americans, Hispanics, and Caucasians, but a variable that might be considered, for example, is a lack of parental involvement. That has a tremendous impact on students, on kids. We have single-parent families, traditional and non-traditional two-parent families, working 2+ jobs simply to make ends meet. Many parents are involved, granted, but many are not. And those that are not, it could be possibly not because they don't want to be, they don't know how to be. And so I think a great part of this initiative has to involve the parents, and there has to be a parent education component to this, a very serious one, I believe.
So I think when people are looking at this, they're of course going to be weighing the costs and the benefits, you know, and there will be a cost associated with this. So you're sort of saying there are other things that we can be doing that are much less expensive, of course, keeping them there longer, you know what I mean? They can get out of school earlier, and if they have this parental involvement. So that's kind of what you're saying, is that there are these other things. That
there may be other ways to approach it.
What about what our last guest was just talking about, how they need more time during the day to have downtime? They're just not, you know, they're getting pushed through the day. And I mean, do you think that if this were extended day and there were some downtime in there, or more, you know, of these, you know, more recreational programs involved in school, that would make it different for you?
I do. We'd certainly have to change up the structure of the day. The impact on students is tremendous, and the stress level from students is extremely high. As a school counselor, I had students in my office every day who are so overwhelmed and anxious about succeeding. You know, and so right now we're dealing with a 6.5-hour day. One of my biggest concerns is about kids with learning disabilities, with emotional disabilities, with psychological and serious psychiatric disorders diagnosed, and those numbers are increasing every year. What is this going to do to their stress level? Okay, because while we're trying to help students to learn, life is happening to them. Life is happening to them. They are not emotionally, many are not emotionally well. They're not physically well, they're not psychologically well. And so I think one of the questions that I have in my mind is, what is the human element in all of this? You know, is it just about test scores and, you know, students achieving academically, or are we about educating the whole child and caring for the whole child? And I know that's difficult. I know it's very difficult because school districts can't do it all. But I think we're headed in that direction.
Right. So the students that this is basically trying to target, those maybe students who may be slower at learning or have disabilities, you're thinking may have the most negative impact. This may have the most negative impact.
It could. I mean, it could. I'm not. We need data certainly to support that, but it could. I mean, these kids struggle so much in a 6.5-hour day. If we're talking about adding 300 hours, that's equivalent to 46 days. Well, we're not going to do that. We're going to obviously add time at the end of the year and time at the end of the day. But these kids oftentimes feel like they are not succeeding because they have so many challenges to deal with. And how do we help them as educators to cope with everything that flies in the face of what they're experiencing?
You know, I've heard a lot about the tests, the MCAS test that everybody is working toward all year, it seems. How has the dynamic in the schools changed since these tests became so important for, I mean, that's essentially how you measure schools.
Absolutely.
Isn't that right? Yeah. So how, since those tests have been, you know, put forth, implemented, and put on such, you know, such high importance in the school district, how has that taken away from some of the other, maybe downtime or other learning or side? Can you give us an idea?
It has changed the dynamic a great deal. Okay. For example, teachers start teaching in September. Kids start learning in September, and they're preparing. They're going, you know, they're teaching not a state mandated, but standards-based curriculum to prepare for a standards-based assessment at the end of the year. The assessment begins in March and happens in March and part of May. Before MCAS, there was a lot more creativity. I saw a lot more creativity in classrooms because there was time for that. In math, for example, there was a use of manipulatives, a great deal. But the curriculum is so tight, there's no wiggle room for teachers to be creative and for students to be creative. Right. Everything is geared really toward the test. Okay.
And as someone who is sort of on the surface against this, what would you have to see come out of Fall River or Lawrence to win you over? What are those factors that you're going to be looking out for?
Well, as a music educator, one of the things I would definitely not want to see, and we see it all the time, is the exclusion of the arts in the curriculum. There is enough data out there, for example, that students are involved in the arts do better academically than those who are not. Why is that? Because if you're involved in the arts, if you play an instrument, if you're involved in theater, any of the arts, dancing, it requires great discipline, and learning requires great discipline, and so that's part of the package there. One of the other changes that I saw that I've seen over time is that children who need remediation, the arts had to come out of their schedule in order, for example, to have, in addition to their regular math class, a remedial math class or a remedial reading class. Sure. So those children did not receive the benefit of being involved in art or music, and truthfully, they minded it a great deal. They felt that it wasn't fair. The kids did not feel that it was fair, that they could not be involved in those areas.
There's some room for adjustment, it seems like, and we'll be looking forward to seeing what that entails. Jean Trink, I want to thank you so much for being here. Thank you for offering your opinion and just being here to give us that other perspective.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And next, the new superintendent of schools in Springfield, Daniel Warwick, is here to discuss the pros and cons of the program as well. Stay with us. You're watching. You're watching 22 News in Focus. This week's topic is about making school days longer to improve student achievement. We've spoken with a state legislator about the law and two educators with years of experience teaching, and they had different viewpoints to offer. Joining us now, we have Daniel Warwick, superintendent of the Springfield Public Schools. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
A very unique position because Springfield has experimented with these longer school days, and it's nice to be able to talk to you as somebody who, we were just saying, started out as a substitute teacher, and now you're the superintendent of schools in Springfield. Congratulations. That's wonderful. So talk to us about what your thoughts are on this pilot program based on experiences in Springfield.
Yeah, I think Fall River and Lawrence are urban centers like Springfield, and I think in urban centers where kids have missed a lot of school, families are more mobile, there's a transiency issue, I think an extended instructional time is very valuable and needed for the kids. Okay. So I'm in favor of the extended instructional day. I've seen it work in Springfield, where our kids have extended time. You know, we have very rigorous standards in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and for some students, they really need the extra time to master the standards.
Okay, how has this program worked in Springfield? What schools? How does the day structured?
Sure. We have a mixture of elementary, middle, and high schools in Springfield, but last year we tried an extra 45 minutes every day for all of the students in those schools. And in those level 4 schools, and these are schools with the highest poverty rates in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, our students made significant academic achievement gains.
Really?
And I think some of those things were due to other factors as well as extended learning time, because it was a work on curriculum instruction, extra professional development for staff. But I think the extended instructional time is really needed in these urban centers.
So how was the 45 minutes added on? Was there specific classes or was there extra down? I guess, how did you divvy out that?
Yeah, and I think every school had a team, and they looked at their needs and their students, and they did some data analysis, and they added what they thought would be a proper fit for their students and their school. So it could look different across the school and by student. So some students who needed some extra academic time were getting core academic subjects during that extra time. Other students might be getting music and art, some of the things that have been cut back due to the focus on standards in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Okay. I was speaking with the state senator earlier on the program about budget cuts. It seems like whenever there are cuts to education, districts have to make very difficult decisions, and it's things like the arts and the sciences that we're cutting. And I was wondering how extending the day works when you are cutting back so much on funding. Do you have any concerns on that in particular as they're, going through this pilot program, and this could be something that everyone's dealing with statewide at some point in our future? Any concerns about budgeting and the funding that you get from the state and making it work? You do have to keep the lights on and have bus transportation and all that?
Sure. Well, of course, that's a challenge. Our extended days were funded with state and federal grants, as are Fall River and Lawrence. My sense is the state legislature is going to look at the data, the results in these schools, and if the data supports it, then you have to find a funding source. And I think you have to look outside the local communities. Obviously, the local property tax isn't going to be able to handle this. But with our state having such a focus on education, and Governor Patrick being pro-education, I think he'd consider extended the day if it proved to be a value add for kids. And
what are some of those elements that need to happen in order for this to be something that really works? I mean, were there things that worked with your extended day and things that didn't work? What are some of those factors you think that they're going to be looking for in Fall River and Lawrence? My sense is they're going to look heavy at the data and the results, the achievement results for students. These are poor communities where the students' results lag. And remember, the MCAS test in Massachusetts, they're the most difficult test in the country. We have if you look at us in a national assessment of educational progress, Massachusetts is #1 in the country. Wow. Why is that?
And actually fares well against the global, competition. I think it's because of the standards and the assessment have been a focal point, and we've actually done a lot of work on core curriculum and instruction and professional development. So we're leading the country, and we actually compete well internationally. But that's because of things like putting extra time in. Like in Springfield, we added 50 minutes of extra time over the last 7 or 8 years for all of our schools, plus the 45 minutes per day. But I think you're going to see school systems also looking at extended time in the summer. That summer learning loss is a big problem. And again, I think for kids coming from poverty, which you see more in your urban centers, they need this extra instructional time. And I think so the state and the federal government would need to make it a priority for these students.
What about what our last guest was just talking about, needing more family involvement, the parental involvement, having your parents, and that doesn't necessarily need to come with an extended learning day. Do you think that that is something that they should be taking a closer look at, or do you think that this extended learning day is what can close that gap? Do you understand what I'm saying, or do you think there needs to be more focus?
And I think you need to do both. We constantly reach out and try to get more parental involvement in the schools, and that is a factor. But when we keep raising the standards and making the curriculum more rigorous, the fact of the matter is the kids are going to some kids are going to need more time to master the curriculum. And we want our kids to exit college and career ready. So you need the extra instructional time. But I absolutely agree that we need to keep working on the parental involvement component, because that's also essential.
In your opinion, are our schools in the state going in the right direction? I was speaking earlier just about how Governor Patrick is always talking about the improvement in schools. Do you see your numbers going up, getting better?
Yeah.
What are you experiencing?
I mean, in our level 4 schools, some of the schools we added instructional time, they had the highest academic achievement improvement rates in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for level 4 schools. So the extended instructional time, the work on curriculum, professional development has made a difference. I think Governor Patrick should be proud, because our state is rated #1 in the country on the National Assessment of Educational Progress and compares favorably on international assessments. So I think we have a lot to be proud of in the Commonwealth.
Now, it's impossible to please everyone, and we all know that. You must have heard some complaints when this extended learning day went into place. What were some of those things? And even from the teachers. I mean, were the teachers all pleased with this as well? Students, parents? What were some of those negatives that came about? Sure, and I think you heard it earlier, the infringement on family time. Some of the teachers were literally exhausted, because you're extended their teaching day, and they're difficult jobs at the beginning. But I think we always have to focus on the kids
And if our kids need this, we have to make the adjustments necessary.
Okay, very good. Daniel Warwick, Superintendent of Schools in Springfield. We're going to continue this conversation. We're going to take a short break, though. Stay with us. We're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Today we've been talking about the pros and cons of longer school days. Lawrence and Fall River School districts will be part of a 3-year pilot program that will lengthen the school day. We've heard from a legislator and educators with years of experience and different opinions to help you understand the issue better. It is a controversial subject, but one that school departments across the Commonwealth will certainly be watching closely. That is our program for today. If you've missed any of it, you can watch it in full on our website at WWLP.com. Thanks to our guests for joining us. Thanks at home for watching. From all of us here at 22 News, hope you have a wonderful Sunday.